He needs an introduction. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Senator Cory Booker.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So they just told me we don't have as much time as I thought we had. I thought I was going to be able to hang out, take pictures and everything, but we're taking a 2.5-hour drive to Florence afterwards. So yes, going to the PDI. But I'm excited to be here, and I want to jump right in because I know there's so many issues you all have been discussing today, but I'm actually here to talk to you about you, if you all don't mind. And if you allow me, there's a little history that I love, and this is just the history moment, if you don't mind, because one of my greatest heroes, his picture is in my office. Big picture of him is a man named Frederick Douglass, and right, and you all know Frederick Douglass well. Extraordinary man, born into enslavement, escaped slavery, and became really one of the best known human beings in all of America during his time. He was an abolitionist, he was a suffragist, and just an extraordinary leader, but he was nationally known. Here's something that most people don't know. He was the most photographed person of the 20th century, of the 20th century. The incredible, I'm sorry, the 19th century, the 1800s. I'll catch up with y'all. Don't worry about it. Y'all are ahead of me on all these facts. But the powerful thing is that he really understood the power of that medium. It was new. And what he wanted to do, you've all seen pictures of Frederick Douglass. A lot of them are these daguerreotypes, this man who invented this way of sitting where he was dignified and in a three-piece suit. And he was very, very famous. The other hero in my office, if you're there, is a person that I want to read to you, a letter that Frederick Douglass wrote to this person. The other person is somebody that would never have been known had there not been a book written about this person. This person would have died like so many heroes have without being known. But this book got written, and suddenly they became, in the latter years, especially after their passing, a very famous human being. And this is this person writing to Frederick Douglass, asking for him to give testimony to the truth of this book and the incredibleness of this person's life. But Frederick Douglass is almost profoundly affected by the fact that this person is actually even asking him to do this. And so here's the letter. August 29th, 1868. Dear Harriet, I am glad to know that the story of your eventful life has been written by a kind lady, and that the same is soon to be published. You ask for what you do not need when you call upon me for a word of commendation. I need such words from you far more than you can need them from me, especially where your superior labors and devotions to the cause of the lately enslaved of our land are known as I know them. The difference between us is very marked. Most that I have done and suffered in the service of our cause has been in public, and I have received much encouragement every step of the way. You, on the other hand, have labored in private. I have wrought in the day, you in the night. I have had the applause of the crowd and the satisfaction that comes of being approved of by the multitude, while the most that you have done has been witnessed by a few trembling, scarred, and footsore bondsmen and women whom you have led out of the house of bondage, and whose heartfelt God bless you has been your only reward. The midnight sky and the silent stars have been the witness of your devotion to freedom and of your heroism. I know of no one who has willingly encountered more perils and hardships to serve our enslaved people than you have. Much that you have done would seem improbable to those who do not know you as I know you. It is to me a great pleasure and a great privilege to bear testimony for your character and your works and to say to those who may come that I regard you in every way truthful and trustworthy, your friend, Frederick Douglass. Now, I tell you that because we make a mistake in history. Most of American history is this great man theory of history. These great men descend like men from Mount Olympus, and their names are George Washington or Lincoln or King, and they lead us to freedom, and we forget the truth of America, which we are all here because of ordinary Americans who rose to do extraordinary things in the cause of our country. I see this as a United States Senator, which I feel this incredible privilege. I crisscross the country, and folks want to hear what I have to say, but I want to tell you something about the Senate that you all know already. We didn't get suffrage in America because a bunch of men on the Senate floor in 1920 came together and said, hey, fellas, let's give women the right to vote. Ready? Break. That's not how it happened. We didn't get voting rights in America because the man that was doing the longest filibuster in American history on the Senate floor, he's got the Senate record. You all never heard of him. His name's Strom Thurmond. And we didn't get voting rights or civil rights because one day Strom Thurmond came to the Senate floor and said, I've seen the light. Let those Negro people vote. Change doesn't come from Washington. It comes to Washington by folk like the ones in this room. Here I am on a Saturday afternoon, and there are a lot of things to do to luxuriate in the blessings of the freedom and liberty that we have. And yet you all chose to be here, most of you since this morning, talking about what you can do in service of your nation. And it bothers me sometimes how much people underestimate or undervalue the activists that are in this room. Every great achievement hasn't been of the bold names in history that we read. It's because it's been in small rooms like this. Look around here. This may be a little bit of a fancier hall, but there are folks that met from South Carolina to New Jersey, often in barnyards, afraid, black and white, planning the greatest infrastructure project this nation has ever known, called the Underground Railroad. There were folk, black and white, met in basements of churches, planning freedom rides. Men and women whose names rarely get blipped into history, and often the only reason they do is because they paid the ultimate price, like Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner. And so today, what my friend, Crystal Spain, and she's my dear friend, she's amazing. She's got leverage over me, y'all. When I ran for president, she ran me all over South Carolina and was there for me in so many ways. And when she would take me up to here, I get really nostalgic because my father grew up about 45 minutes to an hour north of here in Hendersonville, North Carolina. And so today, I just want to talk to you a little bit about how you all are sitting at a crossroads of history. And as much as I love Joe Biden, I'm going to talk about him a little bit. As much as I love his running mate, I don't know if you ever heard of her. Her name's Kamala. As much as I love these folks, I'm here for you because you all have the power to bend the arc of the moral universe. Now, I know the power of each of you because I'm sitting here because of the power of individuals. I'm telling you right now, I've seen it in so many ways. I have this one great story from New Jersey. I interviewed a bunch of people about this story, so I know all the facts. But the story starts before I was born. 1965. A white man is sitting on a couch in New Jersey watching TV. Now, if there's young people around you, extraordinary. I love Gen Z. I love myself some millennials. I don't know why my generation is called X. It's like, come on, couldn't we got a better name? But if you're around a young person, just tell them how difficult it was back in the 60s to watch TV. First of all, we only had 3 channels back then. And then second of all, you had to get up to change the dagnap channels. That was a hardship. I still to this day think my dad had my brother and me just so he could tell, get up, boy, change the channel. And so in 1965, there's this white guy in New Jersey sitting on a couch watching TV. And the movie, some of you all with a little more gray hair, I shaved mine so you can't tell it's gray. You might remember the movie. It was called Judgment at. Yeah, a lot of folks said the movie. On March 7th, 1965, they're watching the Judgment at Nuremberg. And what happens incredibly is they break away from this movie to show a bridge in Alabama called the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And there's these marchers marching across, led by this young guy named John Lewis. And I had the privilege of serving with this hero in the United States Congress. And he told me that when they realized that the Alabama state troopers on the other side of the bridge were not going to let them pass, he said, they were telling them to turn around. They said, they talked amongst themselves and said they're going to kneel and pray and then go back to the church. But before they could kneel and pray, tear gas was shot at them. The troopers stormed in with billy clubs, banging people over their heads. And this is the challenge in the mayhem and the violence, horseback riding in. The challenge really wasn't what their suffering alone was about, challenging, but the challenge was what happens with the people on the couch watching. And this man stands up to the challenge because his instinct says, I gotta go to Alabama. And then he realizes that he just started a business, a law firm. He can't afford to close his business for a week or what have you. In fact, he can't even afford a plane ticket. So he slumps back down on the couch. But then he thinks to himself something that is the great American tradition of the folk in this room representing that tradition. One is, I'm not going to allow my inability to do everything to undermine my determination to do something. And so I'm going to do the best I can with what I have where I am. And he does a calculation in his mind. A lot of people underestimate the power of the small thing done repeatedly over and over and over again. People underestimate that. It's like the three men saying, let's see who can catch the most fish here. And they had on the table lots of different tools. First man took the gun, shot at the water, nothing happened. He threw the gun away and walked away. I can't catch any of these fish. The next man had a fishing pole. He threw it in the water, waited for a while, no biting. He goes, there's no fish in this pond. And he walks away. The next guy takes the cup there and starts taking the cup, little cup here, putting it over there. He goes, what are you doing? He goes, eventually I'm going to get all that water out of that lake. I'm going to catch me some fish. So the guy on the couch thinks to himself and says, you know what? I can do an hour a week more of pro bono work, 1 hour a week in the cause of civil rights. And so he calls around New Jersey to find out who needs some civil rights. And he finds this young black woman named Lee Porter, who was head of something called the New Jersey Fair Housing Council. Now, I've interviewed her. She's no longer a young woman. She is 94 years old and still the head of the New Jersey Fair Housing Council. Her name is Miss Lee Porter, still fighting for housing rights. Now it's not as much African Americans as it is Muslim Americans and LGBTQ Americans who are denied housing and discriminated against often. And so back here in the 1960s, she's like, thank you, Jesus, I need some help. And he's like, all right, let's get to working. And they designed this sting operation where when blacks were denied housing in white neighborhood, they would send a white couple behind to see if the house that they were told was sold or pulled off the market was still for sale. And they got pretty good at it. And he says 3, 4, 5 years pass. It's 1969. And this woman, this lawyer, the man gets a case file of this family coming up from the South who was looking for a place, homes to live in where the best public schools are. And they find that they looked at a house in one of these incredible towns and they were told the house was sold. They fell in love with this house, but they said, oh, I'm sorry, the house is already sold. So the black couple leaves and the volunteer white couple come and they found out the house is still for sale. And the white couple puts a bid on the house. The bid is accepted. And amazingly, papers are drawn up. And on the day of the closing, the white couple does not show up at the real estate agent's office. The lawyer does, and the black man from the family. And they walk in and they confront the real estate agent. And this should be the end of the story. The real estate agent said, you got me, caught me, violating fair housing laws, whatever. But no, the real estate agent sees he's caught, stands up and punches the lawyer in the face, and then sicks a dog on the black man, a Doberman pinscher. And it's some fight, things getting spilled all over the place. It's just a tough fight. And eventually the lawyer and the black man get out, and the guy's yelling after, you can't move here. You're going to destroy this community. Your people don't live here, saying all these things, but they go back to work. Legal letters written back and forth. The owners of the home find out what's going on. They're embarrassed. They agree to sell the home directly to the black family, and the black family moves in. 1969. And then 41 years later, the young baby from that family becomes America's fourth black person ever popularly elected to the United States Senate, me. I am here because a guy got up off the couch. I am here because a man did the best he could with what he had. And every day I remember this. My parents never let me forget that the biggest thing you could do in any day is a small act of goodness, kindness, decency, love, or activism. It is one thing to complain about the world, and there's a lot to complain about. But in life, you don't get everything you pay for, but you have to pay for everything you get. And the question right now, the challenge right now, is what are we willing to pay for? Because I'm telling you, I've been shaken. I really have. My parents told me about this. They prepared me, as many of the families of the people in this room have. But I'm sorry, my generation, we had lots of privilege, lots of blessings, lots of opportunity, but I've been shaken. I was shaken first when I moved to Newark, New Jersey. I'm a kid that grew up in that suburban town. But I moved into the neighborhood I still live in right now. I'm the only United States senator that lives in a low-income neighborhood. We don't confuse wealth with worth. It's an incredible neighborhood. But when I moved there after law school, I lived in a community where you see the savage injustices up close. And yet you meet these people of grit, guts, and grace who are activists who never ever stop laboring in the cause of our country. And so for the last 25, 26, 27 years of my life, I leave my job, whether it used to be City Hall as mayor, or leave Washington and go back to New Jersey, where I'm going to go back to tomorrow when Miss Spain is finally done with me. And I fly back to a community in struggle. In the mayor's office, in the Senate office, I have a picture of my city council seat, the district I represented, the map that we used in my first city council race, because my parents told me, don't ever forget where you come from. Don't ever forget the people that put you into office. Don't ever forget the debt you owe. You drink deeply from wells of freedom and liberty and opportunity that you did not dig. You eat lavishly from banquet tables prepared for you by your ancestors. Don't you dare, young man, sit here and get dumb, fat, and happy. You owe a debt you can't pay back. You got to pay it forward. And it's, you know, God has, the universe has wisdom in it. I move into a community. I always say I got my BA from Stanford, but my PhD on the streets of Newark, because I met these local activists that are more Harriet Tubman, Ella Baker, these incredible grassroots activists that took me under their wing and taught me that you can never take anything for granted in America, because all the things that your previous generations earned can be taken away from you if you don't remain forever vigilant. And what have I seen in 25 years? I've seen assaults on union rights. I've seen assaults on voting rights. Recently, I've seen assaults on a woman's right to choose and make her own reproductive decisions. But perhaps the most time I've been shaken, if I can take you there, if you don't mind, was one day I was sitting on the Senate floor. Now, I cannot step onto the United States Senate floor without feeling the majesty of that space. It's the most sacred civic space, the capital of the United States of America. And when I walk onto that floor and know the debates that have been held on that floor, the fights and the filibusters, the legislation passed, I'm on a floor where everything from Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security, civil rights law, suffrage, so many things have passed on that Senate floor. I feel the history there, and I know what it took from the activism of Americans to finally get the Senate to do what's right. And on this day, a particular day I want to take you to, I'm sitting in the back rows. You see, I'm the junior senator from New Jersey, and my seat's way in the back. And I sit there with some cool people. The junior senator from Nevada. She's Jackie Rosen. She's bad. I'm bad meaning good, not bad meaning bad. And there's another man that sits next to her. We got her sandwiched by baldness. His name is Mark Kelly. He's the senator from Arizona. Now, y'all applauding, but he's not from Arizona. I'm calling him out here. I don't do this when I'm in Arizona, but I'm telling you the truth here in South Carolina. Man's born and raised in New Jersey, for crying out loud. And you want to hear the embarrassed thing about Mark Kelly? He's in the New Jersey Hall of Fame. And I only get to go to sit in the audience and watch other people get inducted because he's an astronaut. He's got a bad wife. He does. He really does. His wife is better than him. He went to some school that some men figure out how to marry above their station. That's what he did. And so we're sitting in the back. And it is this moment where the vice president of the United States, a guy named Pence, is presiding over the United States Senate. And I'm watching one of my colleagues after another on the other side of the aisle stand up and try to make a case for us to not certify the Electoral College. And I'm just sitting there because sometimes I don't just assume. I sit and listen to my Republican colleagues sometimes when they speak, and I'm like, what can you tell me to make me say that one of the rare times in American history we're not going to do what the people have told us to do in a democracy? And then something happens. Armed men run up to the presiding officer's seat and grab the vice president, put hands on the vice president of the United States, and pull him out of the room. That got my attention. And I'm like, what's going on? Lankford from Oklahoma is speaking at that moment and is stopped from speaking as a commotion goes on and the vice president is pulled out. Now, he doesn't go far away. I want to tell you guys a little something. There's a little back room behind the Senate chambers, a long plush hallway, and then there's a vice president's office where they moved him into there and they shut him in. And then we see people coming onto the Senate floor, staffers, some of them crying and shaking. And that's rare because to get onto that Senate floor, you got to get special passes if you're a staffer. Sometimes you got to get special permission. But now they're just herding staffers in. Chuck Grassley is told immediately to replace the vice president of the United States to preside over the United States Senate. Then eventually doors are being slammed. It's a place with a balcony like this. All the doors are being slammed and more people with weapons are coming onto the floor. I look at my cell phone at this point and now it's blown up. Friends and family, are you okay? Are you okay? Because none of us were realizing or seeing what you all were seeing at home. And then a deliberation that has never gone on the Senate floor. Never happened before in American history where the law enforcement officers, some of whom were battling for their lives, being attacked with flagpoles and the American flag, officers being beaten and sprayed with bear spray, they're battling outside. The officers with us are trying to figure out how do we get the world's most deliberative body safely out of this chamber. And finally, they figure it out. They get an escape route for us. And then me and Mark Kelly decide that we're going to wait to make sure everybody gets off the floor and watch our six to make sure if any of that mob break through, we can fight them and delay them from getting to our more elder colleagues. I don't know if that conversation either has ever been held in American history on the Senate floor. Eventually, everybody got off. I checked on the press that's still stuck in the gallery and then went off. First thing I see is an officer on the ground, and along the escape route, I saw 3 injured officers. I get to this room where they're holding us, and it was actually close to my official office. So I talked my way out into my office, and I barricade myself. Again, I don't know if this has ever happened in American history, where the most powerful nation on the planet has their legislative body barricading themselves in their room, in their offices. I put furniture in front of my outside door. I go inside, I put furniture in front of my inside office, and then I turn around to turn on the TV. And the first image I saw broke me. I think that we all carry scars. I don't think you could have hope for America without feeling scars. In fact, I think if America hasn't broken your heart, you don't love her enough. It's heartbreaking things that are happening in our country that shouldn't happen. And on this day, my heart was broken. My soul was scarred because the first image I saw on that TV, right feet from where I was sitting, was the Confederate flag. And I thought of my daddy from Hendersonville and what he would have thought if he was still alive. Seeing with bravado the Confederate flag being waved in our capital. You know, the Confederates, they tried to take the capital. That's one of the reasons for the Battle of Gettysburg, but they were rebuffed by the Union Army. These traitors to our nation were stopped. But now, generations later, the flag is waving with bravado. And more than that, there are T-shirts that people were wearing, Camp Auschwitz, celebrating the slaughter of millions of Jews. My friends that are Capitol police officers in the building, they told me awful stories about the racial epithets they were being called, the hate that invaded our Capitol, the violence that invaded our Capitol. A Capitol police officer injured that day, died from those injuries, was actually from New Jersey. His name's Brian Sicknick. And there's something about that moment, though, that I'll never forget. You see, all of us in life have been knocked down. All of us carry personal pain. All of us have had this nation break their heart. But you are never defined as a people or a person by what happens to you. You're always defined by how you choose to respond. And the response that night, late in that night, after midnight, the first response that got me moving was this elderly lady named Nancy Pelosi, who said, "We are going to count these votes. We are going to certify this election. We are not going to let them win. I don't care how long it takes." I think it took till like 4 o'clock in the morning. But she got Chuck Schumer, everybody back into the Capitol, and we started doing the process. And by the time the sun came up, we had certified an election. But this is what got me excited. Over the next 2 years, from the lowest point, one of the great nadirs in American history, one of only 2 times that our capital has ever taken over, we then go on over the next 2 years to have the most productive Congress ever in my lifetime. We passed some laws, y'all. I'm telling you, come on, I don't have time to even go through them. We passed laws. I'm driving your highways since I've been here because I don't know if I told you, she's got me going all over the state. But I see all this road construction going, all these highways being built because Joe Biden and the Democratic Congress sent a whole bunch of infrastructure down here. I count hundreds of people employed in construction jobs. Colleges and universities all over this state, from our HBCUs to other research institutions, got hundreds of millions of dollars to do critical research. Folks, healthcare has exploded in this country. Millions of more people under this president, hundreds of thousands of African Americans. In fact, the number of African Americans with insurance under this president went up 50%. And we took a nation that of all the Western countries that had the worst, one of the worst levels of maternal mortality, this president said, no, nor, not on my watch. And he took some of the most important steps to help mothers survive after childbirth by extending care for over a year on Medicaid. But he didn't stop there. He said, you know what? We've got to make sure that in a pandemic, we are going to protect businesses, and brought billions of dollars into saving small businesses all around the country. He didn't stop there. He said, we've got to pass some gun safety laws in our country. The first time in 30 years, we passed gun safety legislation in a bipartisan manner we negotiated. But he wasn't done there. He said, there's a problem with climate change in our country, the most significant climate change bill in our nation. He didn't stop there. We were able to take a bill called the Child Tax Credit and expand it to cut child poverty in this country in half, proving once and for all that being poor as a child is not a moral condition, it's a policy choice. Oh, this president, I can go through the things we did together, things folks don't talk about. We're a nation that has some of the worst environmental hazardous conditions, environmental injustice. I've gone all over this country in the last 10 years and seen these conditions, from Lowndes County and the lack of sewage systems to cancer clusters like the one we see on Baton Rouge along the Mississippi River, where they literally call it Cancer Alley, to states like mine and yours that have these places called Superfund sites, highly toxic sites. And guess what the number one indicator of whether you live around toxicity is? The color of your skin. And this president said, no, 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 we're putting billions of dollars to work to get rid of these Superfund sites, to clean up this toxicity and get every lead pipe. We have the money now already allocated to get every lead pipe out of the ground so children's drinking water is finally clean in this country. This is what that Congress did. And so a lot of people sometimes say to me, what has Joe Biden done? And I'm like, how much time do you have? How much time do you have? But I always end up and say it's not about Joe Biden and what he did. It is about what we did. Because this is not he government, it is we government. You get the government that you deserve. And that's a hard thing to say, because there's so much work it takes to make change in America. And I know I'm here in South Carolina. And I know how hard it is sometimes to have folk that are voting in ways that make the walls of change seem so difficult and so implacable. But what I want to tell you all right now is, don't give up your power. Don't surrender to cynicism about this nation. Don't stop the fight down here in South Carolina. Because I know the power of the people is always greater than the people in power. I know what small rooms like this have done in our history, and I know what you can do to shape our future. I know the activism that it takes to make change, and I have seen it in this state. Now, I want to tell you, President Biden is a fascinating man. I was with him in the White House last week, and I get to have him a lot. I get to hang out with this man and talk to this man, and I see he's constantly underestimated. I was with him, I don't know if you know this, but I was with him on the presidential campaign trail. And you see a lot of tension and a lot of pressure in presidential campaigns. I still remember Clyburn had this fish fry. And that is when I was reminded how hot it could get in South Carolina. I thought, it's at night, the sun's down, it can't be that hot. But I sweat through 2 T-shirts that night. And I remember seeing Joe. How you doing, Mr. Vice President? Sticky. I didn't know when I read the temperature, that's the temperature. Hot, muggy, sticky. But in all the pressure, all the national televised debates, I am sorry. I love I'm a little bit of a political junkie. So I get to hang out with people that I used to read about and see on TV, and I like to see what they're like when they're in person. I've got a chance. I feel like I live Forrest Gump life sometimes. I meet a lot of famous people. Some people are exactly who they seem like on TV. If you ever meet Oprah Winfrey, she's exactly who she is on TV, except she did never give me a car. I am telling you, there are some people you meet and you're disappointed. I'm being honest. And one of the things that often disappoints me is seeing people that are not kind. Because I'm a big believer that someone who's nice to you, but not nice to the waiter is not a nice person. Now, let me tell you something. Joe Biden is a very kind man. I saw him in the hardest, highest pressure situations that can be and saw how kind he treated folk. Not just the folks that came to see him, the folks that clean up afterwards, the folks that did his makeup or went to get him some water. This consistent kindness. I think his superpower is empathy because, like many people in this room, he's seen hardship and tragedy in his own family's life. But I want to end with this understanding that I have this faith in the players on the field right now. I really do. But I'm worried about this coming election. I really am. And if we don't understand, sometimes we get caught up in personality and people and not problems and policy. We've got to get folks focused in this election on what's really important. And what I'm excited about South Carolina is that you all have a chance in this coming election to begin the conversation. Mark Kelly, he's an amazing man. If you ever get a chance to meet him, he's this engineering. I have a degree in science, political science, but he's got a degree in science, and he tells me, I ask him questions about physics and how do things work. I sometimes ask him questions where I'm just teasing him, but he takes them so seriously. Like, Mark, in a zero gravity environment, how do toilets work? And he's like, oh, let me tell you about these toilets in the space station. And he starts giving me all the details. It's crazy. It's crazy. You don't want to know, by the way. But what Mark Kelly would tell you about moving a body that is still a rocket, let's say, to a body that's taking off takes a lot of energy. That ignition point, that explosion, the energy and the force that's released at the beginning of that, it is a lot to get something moving. And this will be in South Carolina, the beginning of the presidential campaign from February until the conventions at the end of the summer. The story starts here. And what I want to have happen here is to shut everybody down who's rubbing their hands and talking mess and talking things that I don't really, sometimes I'm like, oh, he's so old. And I'm like, age is, you gotta be kidding me. I was in a church here in South Carolina. Let me just tell the truth now. I'm gonna get in trouble now, but I don't care. I was in a church here in South Carolina, and they had people stand up because of whose birthday it is. The pastor was wanting to celebrate some birthdays. And this man who stood up very old, looked very old to me. How old are you, sir? And he said, I'm 60. And I'm like, you're 60? You've been living hard, man. You've been living hard. Woo! You're not that old, much older than I am. This 60 is rough. And then this young, spry woman stands up. She goes, how old are you? And she's like, I'm 95 years old. And then I jump up and I go, the devil is a liar. You ain't no 95 years old. I've been with Joe Biden, and when I was with him last week in the White House, talking about painful, difficult issues in the Middle East, and seeing his hurt and compassion for Palestinian children and for Israeli children, and seeing his mastery of everything that was going on, not just with the current crisis. He'd been on the phone with Saudi leaders, with Egyptian leaders, planning the peace that we can finally get a two-state solution. To see his mastery of the issues, I was like, this is the commander in chief. And if there's ever a challenge, this is when experience matters. And I'm going to tell you, I remember the last guy. Every time he went overseas, I'm like, what's going to happen now? What is he going to say? I want you to know everybody's going to try to distract us from the truth. That we have a president whose record speaks for itself. And to South Carolina, he made y'all promises. I still remember he came down here and Clyburn said, you announced before the debate that you're going to put a black woman on the Supreme Court. And I'll tell you what, he put this woman on the Supreme Court that is one of the most amazing human beings I have ever met. Forget her race or her gender. She was extraordinary. And I will never forget that. I don't know how many people watched her confirmation hearing. And it's the same thing they did to Biden, doing to Biden, they're trying to do to her. They did try to do to her. Defame, degrade, demean. And you remember how she sat there with all of this dignity and all of this honor. I'm sitting there because I've read her bio, I've read her writings, I read her paper, and I'm smiling because I know she's more qualified than every of those men that were sitting on that panel, including me. And I got degrees from Stanford, Oxford, Yale. This is the most qualified person in that room. And when it finally got to be my turn, I just said, nobody's stealing my joy. This is one of the greatest moments I've ever had. And I get to sit in the front row seat. And I told her that our ancestors are celebrating. I told her that God prepared her for this moment. And so I know the players in the positions, folks. And I've been with the president regularly. I know him and I know his wing woman, Kamala Harris. She's an extraordinary soul. So I'm not concerned about them. I am concerned about us. And South Carolina, you speak first in this presidential pathway. You all speak first. And will there be a big turnout or a low turnout? That matters. There are a whole bunch of people running that are out here. I remember what happened when Hillary ran and all these folks that we never heard of before took away too high of a percentage of vote and she lost in some places or lost enough votes to take away from her. So the other person won. We need to say in South Carolina, a commanding, resolute, unwavering, non-equivocating endorsement of this man to give him the rocket ship ignition to begin this campaign. And so I want to end with where I began. You, I am here for you. I'm here for you.
Please, give that.
All right. Don't get me started. God don't like ugly. I love all people, but I only vote for some. No, I want to, in all seriousness, I want to share this with you. I had a tough time of leadership, which was in a horrible storm in New Jersey. I was mayor of New Jersey's largest city, and you all have seen some bad storms here too, so you know what I'm talking about. When hurricanes come up the coast, they can destroy homes and memories, destroy towns, and take lives. And so this is the biggest storm we've seen in 100 years in New Jersey. And it was Superstorm Sandy, and I'm mayor of the city. And I'm worried. I've got a great team, and they're doing extraordinary work, especially my first responders, some heroic saves of rescuing people from flooding. We still lost some lives, but it was a harrowing time. And the night as the storm was coming in, I had a curfew on. We had moved people to higher ground. We knew there was going to be flooding. We did a lot of steps I'm really proud of, but I wanted to go out one more time. And so I jump in a command vehicle. I'm being driven by these two incredible officers, and we're driving along. And then my cell phone rings. And forgive me if this sounds disrespectful, but I think that it began with what I think is the stupidest question in America. I really think this is the stupidest question. At least I thought it was the stupidest question in America. Because it begins with this person saying, hello, this is the White House operator. Will you hold for the president of the United States? And I'm like, who says no to that question? I mean, really, I'm busy. I'm washing my luxurious hair. No. And so I say, yes, of course I'll hold for the United States. Now, let me tell you something. This is 2012. I'm telling you right now, I miss Obama. I miss Obama. And I miss her husband too. Uh, Michelle, I miss her husband too. So this was Michelle's husband. Michelle's husband's on the phone. President of the United States sitting in the Oval Office, checking in on me and the city of Newark. I mean, this is a very beautiful moment. I'm very moved at this moment. And he's just having a hard, it must have lasted only 5 minutes, 7 minutes most, but to have the President of the United States checking in, it was really moving and affirming and encouraging to me at a very difficult time in my leadership pathway. And when I hung up with him, I felt buoyed, but my phone rings almost immediately again. I pick it up again, this time no operator, it's just the governor of my state. Now, this is 2012. You all don't know who the governor was. You never heard of the guy named Chris Christie. You don't know who that is. Y'all don't know who that is. But this is not a partisan moment. This is not a time to double down on division or differences. It's time Americans pull together. And so he and I have this affirming conversation. We check in on each other. And it's moving. And I hang up with him, and then I'm going up a hill. And the car is pulling up the hill, and at the top of the hill, through the dark of night, through the wind and the rain, we see that all the telephone poles at the top of that hill had come crashing down with the trees. It was a mess of wire and wood. And yet, as we got a little closer, we see this light, like a floodlight, but it's being waved dramatically to get us to slow down. And as we got closer, we see it's a man who's holding that floodlight, and he's flashing it back and forth. And then as we got closer, I see the man's wearing a yellow slicker. And finally, my officers, we would have stopped anyway to check on and to communicate with first responders. But my officers pull the car around right at my window, is right at the man, and I roll it down, and then boom, it's an elderly man in a yellow slicker holding a big floodlight. And it's wind and the rain and the noise. And forgive me if I sound disrespectful, but I raise my voice at the man and I say to him, "What are you doing out here?" And then this guy looks at me like I just asked him the stupidest question in America. And he looks at me and he goes, Mayor, look how dangerous this is. I'm out here to make sure no one comes along and gets hurt. I had just talked to the President of the United States of America. And I talked to the governor of my state. I'm the mayor of the largest city in my state, but the greatness I saw best exhibited that night was the man in dark of night, in savage storm, holding a light up so that others would not get hurt. That is the story of America. That is the truth of who we are. That is what patriotism means, not just loving your country. You can't love your country unless you love your fellow countrymen and women. And so, South Carolina, to my fellow Democrats, I simply ask you, the storm is here. The threat is coming. Will you stand up? Will you hold up your light? Will you stand up for women's rights? Will you stand up for health care? Will you stand up for Medicare? Will you stand up for the military? Will you stand up for labor? Will you stand up for each other? Because when we stand together and work together, we win together. And the truth of America goes marching on. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. God bless you. God bless you.
All right, we got a few questions. We are still watching the clock. We got about 10 minutes.
Not every day.
So please keep your question short, and he'll try to keep his answers short. Let's go.
She was more for me than it was for you. Keep your answer short, Booker. Okay. How long is the drive to the PD? 3 hours. Okay. We're going to do it quick, and then I'm going to run out.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Hi, Cory. Thanks for being here. Of course, we love you here in South Carolina, so thanks for being here. The first question is a two-parter. Why did you become a senator? And is there a specific moment or situation that made you propel into that decision to become a senator?
That's a question. That's quite a question. I just think life is about purpose and not position. And when I was a young man, and for some of the younger folks here, I had this really tough conversation with my mom when she was living in Atlanta with my dad, when I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And one of the best things, because by the time you're in your early 20s, you really don't think your mother has anything truly smart to say anymore that can add to your life. And now when I got to my 30s and 40s, I realized she is one of the most brilliant human beings on the planet. But that period from my teenage years to my early to mid 20s, I was usually dismissive, and she was nagging me. And I'm sorry, I really felt like she was pressing me because she kept asking me, what are you going to do after law school? What are you going to do after law school? And she knew I couldn't go to more school because, as my father would say, boy, you got more degrees in the month of July and you ain't hot. So I didn't know what I was going to do. And I go, Mom, leave me alone. I don't know what I'm going to do. And she thought for a few seconds, and she thought to me, and she goes, Cory, I want you to make a decision about your life out of faith and not fear. And so if you're going to make a faithful decision with all the blessings that you have, I want you to take some risks with your life. And she said to me, son, I want you to tell me what you would do with your life if you knew you couldn't fail. And it was a question it haunted me. I didn't have an answer for it. And that question, by the way, still sits on my desk as a senator. But I went out and I put a list of people on the paper. And these were all heroes of mine. None of them were in politics. They were activists. There was a man named Brian Stevenson, who was a death penalty defender in Alabama. He was on my list back in the 1990s. There was a woman named Marion Wright Edelman. She started the Children's Defense Fund. She was on my list. But also on that list of all the names of the people that inspired me the most, that I would be when I grew up if I had the chance, there was a guy that a lot of people here probably don't know named Jeffrey Canada. And he ran something called the Harlem Children's Zone, where he's got a really great book. I read it again as a senator, a really thin book called Fist, Stick, Knife, Gun, about his journey. But he eventually in his life decided to move into the toughest neighborhood he could find in Harlem and start a nonprofit, which eventually became this I think he got a MacArthur Genius Grant. It's extraordinary. And I'm like, that's what I would do. I visited all these people and I said, that's what I do. So I moved to Newark, New Jersey and began a nonprofit. And the people in that community, all these people that took me under their arms when I was their lawyer, they're the ones that pushed me to run for city council. And the tenant president of the projects I would eventually move into, I still live down the street from this spot, was the one that really hammered home that life is about purpose and not position. And what is your purpose? And I said, I want to make a difference in the neighborhood. I want to help our young people in this neighborhood. I explained to her all the reasons why I wanted to continue doing what I was doing. She's saying, now let me tell you why this is what the community really needs and why you'll get a chance to do better. So I did it. I ran for city council person, became the youngest person ever in my city elected. And then eventually, Ms. Jones, another tenant leader, said, we're going to really make change and you need to run for mayor. And I tell you this, the answer to the question about the Senate is that every career step I've made in my life, I go back to the questions that Ms. Jones asked me and go back to trying to center myself along the lines of my purpose. And so the Senate for me, it's not about politics, it's about people and the people that I've wanted to serve from the beginning. And that's why some of the proudest things I've accomplished as a senator, working sometimes with people across the aisle, is issues of criminal justice reform. Passed legislation that got thousands of people released from prison. Passing legislation like the child tax credit that we worked with the Biden administration to get done that cut child poverty in half. I founded the Environmental Justice Caucus. We already talked about that. I moved on to the Agricultural Committee because I know one of the problems we have, and I got to see this here in this town, where you all created a farmer's market, attacked your food deserts, that is access to food, because we spend too much time paying for health care and not enough time investing in food, healthy food. And so I keep with my team, my chief of staff, my current chief of staff is here. Veronica, wave your hand. My former chief of staff is here, a bald black man named Mo Butler, wherever he is, trying to escape me. But we try to keep aligned with that purpose, and the Senate does that. I ran for president a few years back for the same reasons, because when I lined up all the things I wanted to achieve, I thought maybe this position could help me achieve them more. And I'm really hopeful that everybody does this all the time. I take my notes, usually at the end of the year. What are my most important values? How am I doing living up to them? What can I do to better live up to them? And I hope that if my party changes in a way, I watch a lot of my Republican colleagues, when their party shifts to the right, I sometimes worry that they run after their party and forget their purpose. And I just want to make sure that I'll give this all up if it means I can't be who I feel called to be, that same kid that made that decision years ago. Yes, sir.
Senator, we have a question regarding young folks.
Alliteration. Phil Ford.
Right. I wish I could play basketball like Phil Ford from UNC. But
Whole Marvel superheroes have like that alliteration too.
right, you're right. Where's my cape? Just kidding.
Through them all. Go ahead.
We have the high school Dems here today. Wave your hands, high school Dems, college Dems, our young Dems of South Carolina.
High school Dems, I saw one person raise his hand.
Well,
The high school Dem here? You are abandoned, man.
that's right.
See your phone. Come up here.
That's right. Who says young people aren't involved? We are in South Carolina.
Yeah, let me see this, man. What's your name? Evan Loughton.
Actually had a chance to meet you.
Evan, the problem with the pages this summer is they didn't appreciate my dad jokes. And I'm excited for the holiday season because my best dad jokes are about the holidays. Like, why does Santa Claus have 3 gardens?
For all the reindeer.
No, because he likes to ho, ho, ho.
I can guarantee we talked about you every day that we went back to Webster Hall. We talked about Senator Booker and how much he meant to all of us. He truly is such a
So what is the name of the group? You're part of the South Carolina.
I'm the chair of the South Carolina High School Democrats.
Okay. To the South Carolina High School Democrats. First and foremost, you have a great leader. I'm very appreciative that he's here. But second of all, I want to thank you. Earlier than I was, you're active in governance and you're active in elections. And I'm so proud of what you're doing. And more than you know, our country needs you now. Don't wait, lead right now because you are the leaders that we've been looking for. Thank you. Thank you. All right, now where's the college Dems? So there's 5 of you. Okay, I'm very upset with you, sir, because your hair is obnoxious. And you make guys like me feel so inadequate. It's painful. Who is the leader of this group? Sarah, your name is Sarah? And where do you go to college? You're walking. And are you from South Carolina? If I got my clippers out of my bag, could we shave his head, do you think? I remember my very first political involvement was not in high school. It was an activist in college when I was 18 years old. It's my first presidential election. I voted for Jesse Jackson in the primary, and it was just an exciting time for me. And I really was proud. And I want to thank you guys for your activism. When I ran for president, it was a lot of the high school students and college students that fueled my campaign. So it's good to see you here. Phil Ford, what was your question?
You answered it, so I'm gonna ask another one.
Okay.
We've seen tensions rise within committee hearings and everything. This one's a little funny, but last week we saw Mark Wayne Mullen and Bernie Sanders go after it. My take was Senator Sanders could have taken him. What's your take?
I honestly felt a little bad when I saw that because there was a part of me that literally thought it was a joke. You know, this union leader and Mark Wayne Mullins, who is, until he came to the Senate, I still have this like toxic masculinity. I'm like, I'm the biggest, toughest guy here. Maybe John Tester could take me, but I don't know, in a wrestling match. But that was also, it was a funny moment, but it was also kind of when you see your leaders behave in that kind of way. And here we're trying to talk about how do we create peace in the world, and we can't even get 2 men in our institution to not do that. And I think Bernie was right when he said, "You're a United States senator."
Yeah.
But let me just to Democrats, I have these moments sometimes when I was running for president, and I was in Iowa running for town hall stage, and I'm a former tight end from Stanford University, and I'm running down the pathway, and I see a big guy, looks like a linebacker for Iowa State, and he sees me at the bottom of the stage. He goes, "Dude, I want you to punch Donald Trump." And I look up and I go, dude, that's a felony. And then I asked him if I could tease him, and of course, he said, okay. And I jump on the stage and I said to everybody in the audience, I repeated what he said. Some people cheered. To physically assaulting another human being, choosing violence. And I said, no, 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 no. I said, that's how we lose.
Yeah.
When you double down on darkness, don't let anybody ever pull you so low as to resort to that. You think that Bull Connor, we beat him? I say we, the activists beat him because they brought bigger dogs and bigger fire hoses? What they were able to do is, and I don't think they ever made Bull Connor love Black people, but they so inspired the moral imagination of a nation with their artistry of activism that they actually activated people who were sitting comfortably on their couches at home. Thousands of people, because of these activists, poured down, got engaged, got involved, recognized their power, and in 12 days, segregation fell. King said it so eloquently to the activists here, to the high school student, to the college students, to all of us. Remember, the threat we have is not the opposition, it's the apathy. King said it better. He said, what we have to repent for in this day and age is not the vitriolic words and violent actions of the bad people, but the appalling silence and inaction of the good people. Our job is sincerely to get more people activated to vote, because when we know this, when voter participation is up, that's usually when the Democrats win. Or I always say, bad things happen when good people don't vote, but great things happen when great people step up and get out there. All right, one more, Crystal. What do you got? Who we got? Who we got? Oh, it's a gentleman up here. Gentleman.
Senator Booker, given the
Identify yourself with the crowd, Mo. Come on.
I'm Mo Absaf,
Mo has been so good to me on this trip.
Councilman Mo Absaf.
Yes.
Given the increase in organized labor actions like strikes and record contracts, how can Congress protect the right to organize labor and bargain for better wages?
So first of all, you all know this already, and it's great for a lot of us who've been fighting for labor rights for a long time, that we finally have the most pro-labor president we've had in many, many years. And so we have done a lot of things, again, that don't make the headlines. Veronica, we did a lot to protect pensions and union pensions that were going bankrupt. And if they're bailing out the banks, we can bail out working people's pension funds that were mismanaged over the years. So we've helped to make sure that's happened. We've done a lot to fight for the right for Americans to organize, protecting things like Davis-Bacon, and challenging. We're pushing more legislation right now. What am I forgetting the name of it? It's the big labor law that we've been pushing, and I'm forgetting. PRO Act. Who are you, sir? Oh, right here. The PRO Act. Yes. So the PRO Act is extraordinary to empower the rights of folks to organize. So there's union wins that he's had, and there's a union agenda that we still have. But again, everything comes down to how many votes that we have. So I'm very, very grateful for to have a president that has prioritized this, because what you see across this country right now is more and more labor unions flexing their muscle and beginning to create a resurgence of the American labor movement, because corporate profits for a generation now have way outstripped the payment of the wages of labor. CEO pay is way outstripped the growth of labor wages. And so what we see in America over the last 25 years is this really tough period where wealth is growing, but workers, laborers that we called essential workers during the pandemic, the people that are doing some of the most important jobs, it just hasn't kept up. And so we need to do a lot when it comes to this. We talked about this earlier, Mo, when somebody asked me about public education here in South Carolina. We're paying our teachers, public school teachers, so low that people aren't even choosing the profession anymore. Or leaving it. And so we put forth legislation that the president's team has been really friendly to, which is just like, wait a minute, if I'm a hedge fund guy and or gal and I get carried interest, I have a tax rate that's lower than my secretary. If we're using the tax code to do that, what our legislation says is that we should use the tax code to incentivize public school professionals. If you're going to take a job in a public school, especially in a public school in a low-income area, let's take your federal tax bill and draw it way down to where the hedge fund folks are. You would effectively give people 10, 15, 20% increases in pay. So I just have this belief as a grandson of a UAW worker that we have always been a nation that when we build the middle class, when you show people you can have your American dream as a worker in this country, then everything else, we grow our country, the strength of our nation. Now, I think we need to do a lot more on trade policy. This is why, again, this president working with the Democratic Congress has this incredible record. Years of us losing manufacturing. But this president now is doing things to make manufacturing come home here in the United States through the CHIPS Act, through things we're doing with electric vehicles. You're seeing here in South Carolina, more and more manufacturing come back to the United States of America. So I want to see that, but I also want to make sure that as that manufacturing comes back, the people working in those factories can do what my grandfather did. My grandfather not only was able to raise his three children and send them to college, but he was also able to have extra money. He invested in a pool hall. Yes. He invested in a gas station, in a laundromat. My grandfather suddenly became like George Jefferson and moved on up. Let me end with this because I just want to tell you one more time how grateful I am. I apologize for every dad joke I've told today. And what do you call a guy like me who's doesn't have children but still tells dad jokes anyway? You call him a faux pas. But this is a rough crowd. But I'm just gonna end with this so you all just know again. I am going home to Newark tomorrow. She's got me doing a few more events before I leave. And on my street, top of my hill, it's named after that woman that changed my life that I mentioned in the first answer, named Miss Virginia Jones. And she taught me so much. Her son was murdered in the lobby of the building that I would eventually move into when I moved into the projects. I learned from her that real hope, as I said before, is scarred. It needs to be resurrected. Real hope is the active conviction that despair will never have the last word. There's a lot to despair about, folks, but we can be the agents of hope that this country needs through the small things that we do every single day. But I fear that a lot of people have lost that moral imagination to dare audaciously about what South Carolina could be like. In fact, Ms. Jones, when I moved into this neighborhood, she told me, she goes, Cory, describe my neighborhood. This is a neighborhood I've now lived in for over 25 years. And I said, well, there's a crack house there. There's graffiti here. I just described it. And she says, Cory, then you could never help me if that's what you see. And I go, what do you mean? She goes, because the world you see outside of you is always a reflection of what you have inside of you. If you're one of these people who only sees problems and darkness and despair, that's all there's ever going to be. But if you're one of these stubborn people who every time you open your eyes, you see possibility, you see promise, you see hope, you see love, you see the face of God, then you can be someone that helps me. And so I'm going to end with a confession. And the confession is, I'm hoping that if you're filming, stop, because this is really embarrassing. But when I go home to Newark, about 3 blocks from my house, we have this thing in New Jersey. I don't know if you've ever heard of it down here. It's called McDonald's. And the guy who's going to pick me up from the airport is a staffer of mine, served in the United States military, came back as a Newark police officer, was on my security detail. Now he's on my Senate staff. And I get in the car with him. It's a safe space. I can get all my work done. I'm answering texts, phone calls. I just work. And we don't have to talk even that much. I love this man like a brother. He's going to spend Thanksgiving with me, I hope, and my mom. But we just look in the rear view mirror and we know each other for 20 years. We could just communicate just with eyes. So we're driving. He picks me up one time. I'm driving home and there's this McDonald's. And as we're getting ready to pass McDonald's, he looks in the rear view mirror and knows immediately with what he sees, he should turn into the drive-thru, because what he saw was weakness, and the flesh is weak. and so he goes into the McDonald's drive-thru. Now, I'm a vegan. At this point, I didn't know that McDonald's French fries are not vegan. Y'all okay? But I didn't know this at that point. Ignorance was bliss. And so I ordered 2 large French fries, and I'm holding them tight, like that guy from that Lord of the Rings movie, my precious, my precious. And all I want to do is get home, to get on the couch, watch some really bad TV, and just relax from the world for a little bit. Y'all know what I'm feeling about sometimes. And so, but as we're getting ready to pull out, I see a man in the trash can rooting about. And I look in the rearview mirror, nothing needs to be said. He knows me, he knows my heart. So he stops. I roll down my window, I go, "Hey man, what's going on?" And he sort of waves me off. And immediately I realized that the tone of my voice was not right. I need to do a better job of respecting our equal dignity. So I lowered my tone a little bit and I said, "Sir, are you okay? Is there anything I can do to help you out?" And he turns around and he goes, "I'm hungry." I was holding that bag so tight. But the Bible, I'm a Christian, and I know Jesus said something like, if you have 2 McDonald's French fries and your neighbor has none, Jesus said something like that. I think it was the Sermon on the McMount. That's it. And so I opened my bag up and my hand's shaking. I'm giving away my treasure, but I give him one of my 2 fries and he looks happy and he steps away from the car. And then I'm about to turn my head to look forward and he goes, "Excuse me." And I turn back to him and he goes, "Do you have any socks?" Now, a lot of us who work with people experiencing homelessness know that that's something that's often in high demand. But I don't think to carry extra socks in my car. And I look at him disappointedly and I sort of vainly look left and right and go, "Sir, I'm sorry. I don't have any socks." And he goes, "Okay." And he seems to still be happy. He's got the fries. He steps away from the car. I turn to look in the rearview mirror, which is to look, get me home quick. Because as much as McDonald's French fries must be sprinkled with drugs or something like that, they're so addicting, cold McDonald's French fries are no good. So I give him this look of urgency, get me home. And he doesn't move. I'm like, where's the communication? He's not moving the car. And then he puts the car in park, reaches between the steering wheel and his legs, kicks off his shoes, and takes off the socks he's wearing and hands them outside the window to the guy who looks like he's just received something of great value. I'm 3 blocks from my home, y'all. I have socks in my closet that I probably haven't even worn yet from my grandmama last Christmas. But I'm the guy that talks about love and moral imagination. And in that moment, I failed the test. I failed to realize how consistent kindness, consistent activism, having a vision for our society and embodying that vision even before it becomes a reality, because it's the only way that can become a reality. We're all going to leave here today. But I try to interrogate myself all the time because I remember the man on the couch who gave up just 1 more hour. What little more can I do now? Not the big pieces of legislation like the PRO Act and others, but the consistent things I can do in my community, in my neighborhood, because that's what ultimately changes America. I hope when you leave here today, you leave changed, that you leave here determined to do something different than when you came here, because that's the test of a great day of organizing. Is when you dedicate yourself to trying to do a little bit more, even if it's just 1 more hour a week. And I know the party leadership here, Ms. Spain, needs some help, some phone calls, somebody to volunteer 3 or 4 shifts to do something. Because I know what's going to happen in February. I'm going to be up in Jersey thinking about Crystal, Spain and South Carolina, and I'm going to be watching the TV for the results. And I have a feeling what's going to happen. The first call I'm going to make is to Mark Kelly. And I said, "Mark Kelly, you may have been into space, but the biggest ignition in the month of February of 2024 just happened in South Carolina." Thank you.